Two scissors, eh?
Go ahead.
All right.
You win.
Yeah, so for me, yeah, when I first heard the news, I was initially not scared at all because I thought like, okay, this is even if it is something that I mean, we had the Ebola scare, we had different things, and different even wars and
Swine
stuff,
flu
and economic stuff. There was always this kind of like, oh, this if this gets bad, then you're screwed. And this just kind of felt like another one of those things. Like, okay, yeah, they've got this virus in somewhere in China, and they're, maybe it's just the news trying to get a story out of it and make it a big deal. Yeah, and then it turned out like, okay, yeah, this seems like it's a bit more than just a story. It appears to be spreading, but there's a big ass ocean in between us and China, so we're probably good. And then it hopped the ocean, and then I thought, okay, it still doesn't look too bad. It yeah, people are saying stuff, but it will be fine. The whole thing will be fine. And then when it hit Italy, then I thought, oh, okay, yeah, this ain't no joke, and it's gonna be here soon. And at that point, then I switched on to full on like, oh shit mode. So at that point, I was literally at work the guy who was coming in there, literally not trying to touch any surfaces at all, and touching everything with a sanitary cloth. And then when I got into like my like a focus room with just one person in it, just me, I would take like sanitizing liquid and I would spray down the entire table and wipe it all down, and then just work there. And when I was done, I would wipe it all down again and wipe down all like the handles and everything. Like I was really into it. And my main, but even at that point, I thought the actual risk for me was still super low. At that point, like this has always been the thing. The risk for young people has always been low, and that was known. But it was mainly because I'm living with my mom, and she would be in the risk group, that I thought like I'm not going to be the reason for anything happening to her. So that was my main motivation there. And then the time where I started to come around was quite a bit later than Emmanuel. Like I don't even remember exactly when that was. But I was definitely quite resilient with my opinion then, of being, I guess, scared and trying to defend what the government was doing. There was a lot of voices coming in saying that what the government is doing is wrong, and you need to look into more independent stuff. But the issue with the independent stuff was also that it was conflicting with itself. A lot of it. There's just a bunch of noise going on, and the only thing that seemed to be clear was what was coming from the government. Until I started noticing, I started just thinking, okay, I'll give it some more time. I'll give these other voices some more time of day, just to see if there's really anything there. If anything, if I find nothing there, then I can substantiate myself even better than I can now. And when I gave it some more time, then it became clear to me that I also couldn't understand, like I couldn't logic out some things that were happening. Like, some things were just clearly, if not completely wrong, there were some inconsistencies there. So I never went into it as deeply as Emmanuel did. I definitely tried to, and then I thought, okay, I can't be the guy that goes and goes through every rabbit hole. But just after running into some violations of what I think are undeniable principles of what people's liberty should be, and what freedom should be, and what everyone I think should agree with to a certain point. Yeah, even if you were to agree with what the government's statistics were and what they told you was correct information, it still wouldn't make sense at that point. And from there, that's when I made the final I wouldn't necessarily say switch, because it's a spectrum, where you are on that. You're not just for or against, you're kind of, but yeah, that's definitely to the point where I said, okay, what the government's doing is wrong. And then I also ran into the issues of what that means in my personal life, with friends and with people who still advocate what the government is doing. And of course, there was a huge stigma to people who didn't follow along with that, and partly still is. And the other reason that it's calmed down now is because, well, we don't have as many restrictions. It's not really as relevant anymore. And yeah, that was interesting to see how people were, in some cases, abandoning their formerly quite consistent logic in defense of something which I could only imagine they were doing because of how safe it was. And I also understand, like, as someone who was completely on the side of the government, it was very difficult for me to come out of that. It took me a long time and a lot of input from people close to me. I know if my own family and friends had not given me input on that, I don't know if I'd even have ever like made the switch to opposing what the government was doing
differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I can't blame people who still think what the government did is right. But at the same time, that was also very very humbling to experience, just how me, who I thought I'm an innocent person, I've not done anything for anyone to be upset at me for, like, ever, and suddenly I was a guy who had an opinion which people could literally like be angry at me for.
Wow. Yeah.
And I didn't do anything. I was just sitting there. Yeah, I was a heretic. Yeah. And I just felt like, this is so incredibly unfair. Like, people don't understand actually, like, what's going on an individual level.
You just don't care if people die.
Yeah, it was a really bad label being hung around your neck if you just have a certain opinion. And also, as someone who'd never gotten vaccinated with the COVID vaccine, that also made it even more so. It's not just your opinion; you're also going with your actions.
Yeah.
And I never did it because I was opposed to the vaccine. I only didn't do it because I thought that especially later when I made the switch, I thought if I got vaccinated, I would be supporting a system that enforces vaccinations. So if I sort of carry a bit of this weight on my shoulders and I say, okay, I'm going to let go of some of these freedoms that I'm used to having in order to not support a system that encroaches on other people's freedoms, that to me seems like a correct trade-off. Something that I was comfortable with doing. To some extent, obviously not being able to go and meet with your friends anymore in restaurants, and it definitely put even more social pressure on. Although I will say thank you to all my friends who actually did still respect that and still made provisions to meet in places that didn't require that. Y'all are the real ones. And of course then that just kind of, it almost in a blink of an eye, it felt like that all just disappeared when they said, okay, we're getting rid of the COVID certificate. And that was a surreal moment. I almost thought I would be like rejoicing a little bit more. It's funny when we got the news of that happening, people who I previously thought were like totally in with everything that was going on, they were bouncing up and down.
Right. Right.
There was almost no one who was angry at that.
Right.
I think there were a few, but we'll leave them in their corner. They like it there. That was also really enlightening to see, like, okay, so people were actually, the whole time, they were also feeling in a way oppressed by this. And they were also being just quiet.
They were going along with it.
Yeah.
A lot of them. They were